But just to let you know, yeah, so I sent out a questionnaire last week and I was kind of wondering, quite a few people, I think 70 people sent a reply. And the majority of people weren't worried about recording the questions, but there was a significant minority that made me think we're going to record the first part of the question and answer period and not the second part. Because even if there's, in fact, there were just, I don't know, 25% of the people who replied, saying that they would rather not be recorded asking questions. And I think that makes sense. And the last thing we want to do is limit questions. So if you're not used to being part of this seminar series, one of the nice things that we have is the opportunity for an extended question and discussion section that'll be at the end, led by Victor. And we want to absolutely encourage everyone to participate in that. And if you need an excuse to ask a question, mine is that for Victor, he's giving a talk into his screen. So let's respect that and thank him by being prepared to have a conversation about the work that he's going to do, and thank him by way of asking good questions and keeping in touch with him. So without anything further, I will ask you to mute yourself and be prepared to unmute if you want to ask some point of clarification along the way, but keep your important questions and discussion topics, make a note of them if that's important for you. Keep those until the end so that we can have a discussion that's led by Victor. Thank you very much, Victor, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for holding these seminars that are, for me at least, has been very useful and a place where I could find very interesting work, and so I congratulate you for this effort. And I hope today give you an interesting view of what is happening in one specific region of my country, Mexico, where no large earthquake happened. I mean, a magnitude 7+ had happened in the last 110 years, and that may have important implications in the capital, among other cities. So this work is the result of a large collaboration with Kyoto University during the last 7 years, in which so many people is involved in this work. I will show several results coming from the efforts of most of them. So as you probably know, Mexico, as many other countries, settle around the Pacific Ocean, where several subduction zones exist, have a lot of seismicity, 3 different kinds of earthquakes we can distinguish. The most common are those happening below the coast, so close to the subduction margin. Most of them are thrust events. So these areas here correspond to the aftershock areas of each one of these large events. Then we have other kind of earthquakes which are much more deep. So the intermediate depth, intraslab, normal faulting earthquakes. So probably you may recall one of a deadly one that took place on September 19, 2017. This one, a 7.1 event that struck very hardly Mexico City, and several more than 20 buildings collapsed on that time. And that earthquake happened just 11 days after the largest earthquake ever recorded in Mexico. That was also an intraslab event, magnitude 8.2 here in 2017, the September 8, 2017. Anyway, this kind of events, the intermediate depth, which are very, very special or different kind of animals, let's say, because of their physics is different. I mean, as compared with those thrust shallow one. We also have so I want to say that they are much more less frequent, but still are, because several work have shown that they represent a hazard, probabilistically speaking, as large as those happening in the coast, which are much more frequent because of they are much more close to Mexico City. I mean, in Mexico City, the hazard is comparable in terms of probabilistic seismic hazard assessment. And then the shallow crustal events that are much more rare, with in the same fold maybe thousands of years of recurrence period. And we had several iconic events like this one in 1912, the Acambay event that took magnitude 7, just 100 kilometers northwest from Mexico City. Well, so from this picture, we see there's a gap here. There's a place below the coast where no event larger than 7 had taken place since 1911. And this specific segment is the closest to the capital. So, which means that if we consider what happened in 1985 with the disastrous earthquake that took place in Michoacan, a magnitude 8 event, 400 kilometers away from the capital. So this event was iconic in terms for many reasons, not only because more than 15,000 people died, but also because seismologists around the world realize what could happen in a basin despite the distance between the basin and the seismogenic region is so high. So we at that time we didn't actually know the hazard in the city. And this is one picture of one of the largest buildings, the Nuevo León building that collapsed that day. So the point is that people ask what would happen if a similar event would break here in the gap, so where the distance is much closer. And Kanamori and colleagues did this exercise. So they took a magnitude 6.9 of 1989 here, this event, as an empirical green function. And then they produced several scenarios. So here is the recording of that earthquake, the empirical green function at Mexico City. And these are 3 trials, stochastic trials for a larger event taking place in the gap. And below is the actual record of the 1985 event. And they concluded that if that such event would take place in a future, ground motion could be even larger than recorded in 1985. So here's the response spectra. So around 2 or 2.5, 3 seconds. One of the scenarios was larger in a factor 2 or 3 as compared with the one in 1985. So since then, a lot of people have been working, trying to understand better what is happening in that seismic gap. Among other efforts, the first early warning seismic alert has been installed and developed since then in that region, so that now in Mexico City, all people can know if a large rupture approaches. If a large earthquake took place and seismic waves are approaching. So what we did in this large project was to instrument the seafloor and offshore in the gap. Yeah. So we have, as I'm going to say in a second, we have done several oceanographic campaigns. So we deployed instruments offshore, as you can see here. So most of them are ocean bottom seismometers. And we densify the GNSS network onshore, as well as install seismometers, large broadband seismometers on land. So this is just a picture of what have been our work at sea. So 8 oceanographic campaigns. The last campaign was 3 weeks ago. We were there to recover the last instruments that we deployed in November 2017. So some instruments like this shown here are designed to measure crustal deformation at the seafloor. So they measure, as you probably know, many groups or several groups worldwide since a lot of time, I mean, at least like in the last, let's say, 6 years, are deploying this kind of instruments, which are pressure gauges that very sensitive, which are able to measure vertical deformations at the seafloor. And we'll see what's the drawback of this kind of instruments. That they are so sensitive that all the oceanographic signals, which means all the tidal effects or non-tidal effects, which are the most annoying, are overwhelming most of times what could be a tectonic uplift or subsidence of the seafloor. We also deployed two so we'll see here in the next, I think, yeah. So we deployed 2 acoustic transponder arrays. So one at 2,300 meters and another one at 1,000 meters depth. So that was in November 2017. And every year we went with our wave glider, which is a drone, oceanic drone that is equipped with another transceiver here, acoustic transceiver, 2 GPS antennas and a gyroscope. And then from the ship, this is the El Puma, it's one of the 2 oceanographic vessels that UNAM has. The other one is in the Gulf of Mexico. And so from the ship, we say to this instrument how to move around the transponders array while he's sending signals and recording the answers from those transponders, sorry, at the bottom, at the same time as it records GPS data and gyroscope in order to finally have an idea of how these arrays move horizontally. So we're still working on that data. But as you will probably you will agree with me probably at the end, this kind of campaign of geodetic measurements are not as interesting as those continuous that I will show you that no other team have done before, because I will show you how these instruments are also capable to measure tilts of the crust in a continuous way. Well, so, and several seismometers and pressure gauges, so that's it. So on September 8, 2021, there was a magnitude 7 event in Acapulco, just below Acapulco. So this is the epicentral region. And you can see here, so we are here inside the gap, and all the instrumentation that recorded that event. So it is likely the best recorded ever earthquake in Mexico. It was not so large, but it was enough to understand some details as I will present. So the first thing we did was to recover the coseismic slip distribution. For that purpose, we use both GNSS data, as you can see to the left, with these arrows, but also INSAR images that we discretize with a quad-tree downsampling strategy, which is very powerful because it uses some image quality called by neuroscientists as the saliency, which is a quantity of any image that allow us to measure how important are different features of the image. So from that image, I didn't put that measure for that specific image, but from that assessment, we can refine where the information coming from the earthquake is concentrated and get this optimized the data sampling. So this is the joining version of the INSAR and GNSS data. So we to the right we can see the data, the theoretical, the prediction from this model, and the difference of both signals. Here is the difference, and we see something that we already knew from seismic analysis of this earthquake. So it was a confirmation that it was a repeat, in fact, of the 1962 event magnitude 7 as well, which the rupture area is given by this ellipse. So this was also confirmed by comparing teleseismic recordings in Sweden, I guess, in a station that had been recording since the early 1930s, I guess. So the teleseismic recording of both events are extraordinarily similar. So this is mainly why we know this was a repeat. And also that rupture propagated to the northeast. So the epicenter was offshore. This was a relocated epicenter and propagated to the northeast. So this earthquake took place. Let me show you some tectonical context. So these are the slow slip events that happened before that earthquake between 2017 and 2019. Okay, so there was a slow slip event in Guerrero, then a slow slip event in Oaxaca. So we can see again. So here is the first slow slip event in 2017. Then the large magnitude 8.2 earthquake took place in Tehuantepec, so we don't see it here. And that changed everything. So there was a slow slip event initiating in Oaxaca, in this region, propagating to the west, as you can see here, that triggered another 7.2 event February 18, 2018, post-seismic here, and then a new slow slip event triggered by seismic waves, and then finally two different slow slip events that spontaneously initiated. So the point here is that all these events, as you probably know, in Mexico take place the largest slow slip events, I mean in Guerrero, in the world. So, but this was very interesting because these slow slip events were, all of them, the three of them, magnitude 7, so which is very small as compared with the larger events that took place since 1997 every 4 years, that were magnitude 7.5, 7.6. And we in another work, we show that this disruption of that very regular way in which SSCs took place in Mexico, in Guerrero, but also in Oaxaca, was due to the unprecedented seismic waves produced by the 8.2 earthquake that changed the mechanical properties transiently of the rocks at the interface, producing these much more frequent slow slip events with smaller magnitude. So the Acapulco earthquake took place right here, just in a region where no of this slow slip event reached pass through that region. Okay. Also interesting is that most of aftershock were concentrated to the southeast of the rupture. So,
Victor, can I ask you a
yeah.
question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, can you better explain why you believe that this seismic leap is due to dynamic perturbation rather than static or simply
Sure, of course.
fault zone, subduction zone plate evolution?
Sure. I shouldn't probably say that because that would be another talk. But yeah. So in that work, Paul Johnson was a reviewer of that work, so he knows pretty well our arguments. But basically, we did many tests to assess how large the dynamic perturbations from these waves were at the plate interface on one hand. We compute the Coulomb failures and the static perturbation of all the events you have seen here, including the large ruptures. And we use a rate and state model to see how it responded to the incoming waves that we record in many stations that we brought deep to the interface using some technique we developed. And so we conclude that the only way to understand, to explain, I mean, this never seen before a sequence of slow slip event was the dynamic perturbation of the seismic waves that produce an anomalous, very anomalous. I should show you some pictures. Probably I should have some pictures. I mean, you know, in the backup images.
No, but sorry, I don't want to completely destroy your presentation. Sorry.
No problem. But I understand.
I was curious to see that, and I didn't know this work, so I will go.
Of course. No problem. I can show you then all the assessments we did to conclude what I said. Okay. But yeah, it's very likely the case that these properties change as never before in the instrumentation period in Mexico. The way the seismic cycle, in fact. Well, so let's move on because there are different things to talk about here. So we were saying that. So we'll now, yeah. So let's first. So this is the data we use, or the stations. I mean, we use to better understand what could happen before the Acapulco earthquake. So let's first tell you what we did in every GNSS site with the data. So we remove or reduced the most we could the seasonal noise perturbation by fitting harmonic functions in a multi-window inter-SSE multi-window strategy we developed. So for instance, here you see the three components of the GNSS time series in the station Porvenir. And these are the harmonics that once is an iterative procedure, that once we fit and remove that seasonal, we see here the comparison between the original data in blue and the corrected data. So interesting features come out from this correction. For instance, here, so in the gray areas are the previously reported slow slip events in the region. So for instance, here in the vertical component, we clearly see how this correction allows us to see the uplift that we expect in that specific site when a slow slip for this slow slip event specifically, but also here, all this. So this was an important procedure so that the analysis I will show you afterwards, it's more to have more confidence on the results we will discuss later. So we apply this in every station on one hand, and on the other hand, these are the ocean bottom pressure data we recorded since November 2017 until, so I didn't put what we recover last, 3 weeks ago. So we have 1 more year of data, continuous data. And as you can see here, so I will show you data from these long-standing stations. One of them is deployed on the Caucasus Plate, on the incoming Caucasus Plate at 5,000 meters depth, and the other 2 are above the overriding North American plate. This one, OBP4, it's about 8 kilometers from the trench only, yeah. And this is about 1,000 meters depth. So once we filter a little bit these signals, we see they are very similar, okay? So one way to assess whether there's something tectonically speaking recorded in that signals is by taking one of the sites as a reference and subtracting that data. So this is a procedure widely used, which has some drawbacks, of course, but it allows us to remove particularly the non-tidal oceanographic signals that are not harmonic and cannot be removed by simply filtering the signals. So by subtracting here, okay, so what we will do is we will take the data from this very deep gauge at the Caucasus Plate. We will subtract that time series from the other 2. And this is what we get. Okay, so this is in OBP5 minus OBP7. OBP5, please keep that number, is the shallowest side, and OBP4, this one. OBP5, 4, and 7. So, and we filter as well the data from periods longer than 5 days, and this is what we get. The point here is that, I don't know if I have yeah, probably here. So there's a large, no, I don't have the slide, but there's a very large, very well known as well, by the way, correlation between pressure and temperature, particularly in shallow sides. Yeah, so from that high, I don't have that slide, I'm sorry, but believe me. So based on that very high correlation between temperature and pressure, we can correct even more pressure by finding the move out of the temperature, scale temperature that maximizes correlation, and then we can remove that signal. That's what I did to the right here. So this is without temperature correction at OBP5 both, and this is with the temperature correction. And we see here how important may be this correction, because something appears much more sharply before the Acapulco earthquake once we do that correction here, as compared with this signal, for instance. So, but also the long period oceanographic noise is reduced. So we have the first evidence that something could happen offshore before the Acapulco earthquake, where the water column was reduced by about 2 or 3 centimeters. So this is the relative water column in centimeters. So pressure, water pressure can be translated into water column centimeters. By 1 hectopascal is almost one centimeter water depth. Okay, so this is the first evidence that something could happen here before, around like 4 months or 5 months before the event. And this is for the OBP4, which is not, it's more tricky, this side, because a linear secular deformation is not very well adapted to whatever happened before. So it's not, it's not I mean, a linear trend cannot explain perfectly it's much better explained here in this side than in here. So this uplift also seen here in OBP4 may probably be underestimated or overestimated. So we should take with caution that data. Okay, so then let's move to the most interesting part. So these instruments that you will see in a couple of minutes how they are. I mean, they are the fetched units that we are using. Those I showed you in the ship. They are equipped with tiltmeters inside. So these tiltmeters are there for unit control. So their sensitivity threshold is around 430 microradians, which is far too high as compared with expected values with the values expected from tectonic tilts, which are around units of microradians. But once we went to the sea after pandemic and we could retrieve several years of data, I found this. So this is almost the raw data of both components of 1 tiltmeters. This is at OBP5, by the way. And I found this. So this large jump at the time of the Acapulco earthquake. So wow, we recorded the coseismic tilt produced by the event. But more than that, I started to see things that we didn't know what could be. But interestingly, as you can simply see here, they seem to be to some point. ¿Cómo se dice? Affected, or their behavior seemed to change when all the earthquakes take place. Look at this, for instance. This was the last largest event we had in Mexico, magnitude 7.8 in Michoacan, close to the northwest from the big rupture in 1985. So far away, more than 300 kilometers from the site. And look how this signal changed abruptly after that event. So, for instance, but also here, when this 7.2 on February 2018, the Pinotepa earthquake, like almost 200 kilometers away, also the tilt changed the behavior. Not only in this station, you can see also here different things. These are milliradian, so much more. So the order of magnitude of these measurements are by far too high to be real, to be related to something tectonically happening below. So let's take a look more in detail from this. So the first thing I did was, well, let's move on and see whether this idea could have some possibilities. So the first thing was try to orient the sensors, because once we launch the equipments, we don't know how they land. So we don't know the orientation of both tilt components. So what I did was taking a long baseline in each stage. So the same procedure was following in each side. So a long baseline, and I said, well, I'm going to assume that because of course, just one thing that I didn't say. Other thing that we see is that there's a long-term change in the tilt in both sides. For instance, this is the Cocos plate side. So let's assume that this long-term tilt rate is determined by the tectonic plate interaction. So this is okay. So I took this baseline. I obtained the eigenvectors from the data covariance matrix. These are the principal components here. So, and I said, well, the eigenvector associated with the first eigenvalue will be parallel to the plate convergence direction. That's the big hypothesis. Once they did this, so here you have the whole data, no, now in theory oriented, because I assume what I just said. And we see that the coseismic jump goes to the east, right, where the earthquake took place. So let me see. I see. So interesting. And what would happen then? So what would be the tilt prediction, the coseismic tilt prediction from our slip model? I showed you that we determine from INSAR and GNSS data on that side. And that's what I'm showing you here. So this is the tilt, I mean, scale value. So the observation, the tilt, the jump, this jump in tilt is scaled to the theoretical coseismic tilt. And we see that the directions are very similar. So this is not a proof that the big hypothesis I did by assuming that the first eigenvector is parallel to the convergence, plate convergence, and then that the long-term tilting rate is governed by the plate convergence is not a proof, a formal proof, but this gives us some confidence of that this probably be the case, although we don't know why yet. Because, well, you'll see now. Okay. So, and then by taking, looking more into this data and this data, so this, for instance, just before the Acapulco earthquake, look at this. So this is some representation I just figured out how to do. So to see how in space change the tilt in that specific site before the earthquake. Look how this tilting direction gets reversal, so it's inverted just before the event here, then again comes in this part into a similar direction as before, and then another reversal. So I was persuaded that something should be there, but we didn't have why. So, and why we didn't, but it was at that time something unlikely to be possible, because as I will show you right now, so what we did, so by confronting the actual long-term tilting rates here, so which are in that site specifically is 500 around 500 microradians per year, with this, which is one inter-SSC plate interface coupling inversion. So very, very well resolved. I will show you some resolution tests afterwards. So from this GNSS and OBP inversion of the inter-SSC period, I computed the theoretical tilt rates in an inter-SSC period. And they are around 20 millimeters, I mean, no. Like 0.5 microradians per year. So if we compare those values, it's here, they are here. So the theoretical predictions on those three sides are of this order. It's a fraction of microradian per year, while in the data we are finding 3 orders of magnitude larger values. So we came out with an idea that could explain why this large disparity between the predicted values and observed values. So these are the units we are talking about. So there's a glass sphere inside which we have the tilt meter and the pressure gauge, but also the transceiver here, the blue thing here. So we can download the data from the ship as we did every year. But the most important thing is that this glass sphere is fixed upon a a tripod, a steel tripod. So what we thought was probably because if the hard rock, let's say the tectonic plate is tilting, since these instruments are settled in deep ocean sediments that are highly compressible, as we will see, probably this tilting may produce a settlement of the sediments below each each leg, a differential settlement. So first, to assess this idea and this differential settlement here, which is we would expect this settlement in this leg to be higher than in this one, because the relationship between the leg's pressure as the unit tilts, we did the free body analysis and the conservation of momentums and forces of this problem, and we came out with this equation that simply tells us that yes, if you increase the basement tilt with an angle alpha, you will find an equal increase of force in leg 1 as a decrease in leg 2. Okay, so this is linear, no problem. So what would happen in the sediments? So we talked with experts in Mexico City. We have very good experts in geotechnical and soil mechanics, because of the very high compressible water saturated clays that characterize most of the soil of the city where the seismic waves amplify. So we came with these people, Efraín Ovando and his team, who has a huge laboratory to make tests with soil samples. And he said, well, what we can do is first, we need to quantify how the stress, the vertical stress in that sediment column could be. For that, we can use the Business stress distribution, which is a highly nonlinear function that depends on the actual load at the surface, a circular load you apply, and you can assess how these stresses change with that. Okay, so R0, for instance, here is the radius of the circular point load. Z is the depth, and Q is the actual load. Okay, good. So you have the blue line. Then we have to add to this the effective vertical stress, which is the black curve. So since the late 70s, several researchers already did mechanical tests in seafloor sediments, very deep seafloor sediments as well. And so these gamma values, so the way the effective pressure change with depth has been studied, and it can change a lot, in fact, depending on the seafloor type of sediments. Okay, so then from this total stress distribution, we can estimate what the settlement is in the sediment column using this equation that is very well known among the geotechnical experts. And we see how, for instance, here the settlement is around for this specific, this is the initial condition. Once we launch the instrument, we know exactly what the buoyancy is of the equipment, the weight, and what the pressure is at T0 at the initial time in the horizontal initial assumption. So this is the load of that initial condition. This would be the settlement. So this settlement depends on other, of course, sediment properties, mechanical properties, such as the compressibility index, which is very high and diverse in seafloor sediments. And the effective pressure, the effective pressure gradient here, gamma, the black curve here, and the void ratio of the sediments. So these parameters have been largely studied in different the ocean, Pacific Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, and so on. So you can see that a meter depth at a meter depth, so we have almost 2 orders of magnitude difference in settlement. So it's very concentrated in the very top part of the sediments, that settlement that in this case is around 0.4 millimeters. Okay, but what happens once the basements start tilting, let's say produced by a slow slip event? So something that will take a long time with typical very long periods, no? So during 4 months, for instance, very slowly tilting basement. What would happen in this system? Well, for an increment of alpha, which is the settlement tilt, we will have an increment of the lex pressure in the sediments, and then an increment on a change in the settlement. I didn't say so. We will assume that no movement will take place in the leg where pressure is decreased because of suction effects. That's what people studying this kind of water-saturated sediments believe is the most reasonable. So we will only measure the settlement on the legs that are whose pressure is increasing, one thing. And the other thing is that we will neglect any diffusion processes that may take in a shorter time scale. So we are analyzing very long periods, so quasi-static deformations and how this system evolves. So once said that, once there's an increment in alpha, then there's an increment in the settlement that will produce an amplification of tilt that will have another increment in the pressure. So for each increment of the basement tilt, we will have a feedback between that increment and the effective leg pressure due to this differential nonlinear settlement in the legs. So we solve that iteratively, assuming a linear increment of the tilt from 0 to 2.5 microradians. And where you see here, for some conservative values of the mechanical properties of the sediments, with this, what I mean is that if you analyze the literature of those mechanical properties of different sediments, so much higher compressibilities have been found up to around 5, for instance, if I'm not wrong. I think it's correct. But also much smaller effective pressure gradients, which would make much higher the settlement in the system. So these are conservative values, and we see that as the tectonic tilt is evolving. Here, what I'm showing you is the surface settlement. Okay, and we see how fast the settlement start growing. And this dot corresponds to the moment at which the effective instrument tilt reaches the sensitivity of the tilt meter, which is around 430 microradians. Right. So if we based on this exercise, we could think that around if the basement has tilted around 1 microradian, so the instrument could have the effective tilt would have been more than 400 times larger. So there's a tilt amplification due to this differential settlement. So yes, I have to go. Sure, good. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go faster now. So, okay, these are all the estimates we did for different values of compressibilities, and so that's this model at least point out towards the validity of this idea. Is a reasonable thing to believe that they are actually these instruments, despite this very low sensitivity threshold, actually are recording tectonic deformations. Good. So what we did, so here is just, I have to move on very fast now. So then we could correct that amplification from the actual data, and these are the amplified tilt rates based on what? Based on those theoretical, I show you those theoretical tilt rates from the inter-SSE periods based on the coupling inversion. So what we see here in OBP5, so most of this is a radial histogram of tilting rate at OBP5, for instance. So the tilt, most of the time, tilt is, I mean, the instrument is tilting toward the cocos plate. So, and we have also an ambiguity in the direction of the eigenvectors. So we had to decide. So this is the direction of the vector was chosen. So these two sides were in opposite direction because they are in different places. But it's not important for the following. I mean, the fact that they were assumed in an inverse direction. Then we have OBP4 here, which is much more stable with the speed tilting rates much smaller and some rapid tilting episodes. So just to say here that this is a tilt reversal that we will see what it is. So when comparing different kind of data, so this is the tilt, this is the pressure data and a GNSS data. So we see that before the earthquake, so we already see this pressure evidence, seafloor pressure evidence, so that something happened before the earthquake, that we will see in GNSS also. But look at this, please. So in the cocos plate, we see something happening much in the cocos plate, in the incoming plate. So something happening about 4 months before. So again, an evidence that something is happening. So the GNSS, if we take a look more into detail, we see that in the vertical, stack functions, stack time series in these stations before the event show that there's a subsidence here in this blue, while in the red ones, so this is OBP5, this is the plate convergence direction of the displacement, GNSS displacement. So the stack of these three are going to the south, to the plate. So there are evidence. So when we invert, and after the earthquake, we see very large release of strain energy, not only because of the coseismic and postseismic. So these are resolution tests which are very promising to be confident about what I will show you now. So these are probably the first joint inversions of GNSS data, OBP pressure, and tilt, ocean bottom tilt measurements. And you see here the timeline below. So before the earthquake and after the earthquake, we'll look what would happen. So this is about, I don't have here the months, I'm sorry, but about 6 months before or more, something started happens far from the coast and close to the trench. Then tilt station, both of them in a consistent way, start tilting to the north. That's exactly the reversal we found before the earthquake. And so an offshore slow slip event seemed to propagate it towards the coast and very close to the epicenter of the earthquake. And other things also happened. So I didn't mention, but at Oaxaca at that time initiated a slow slip event as well. And deep in these regions, something were happening as well. So then the earthquake happened. So the first month of aftershocks. A large concentration of slip in the in the rupture area, but this we see also something very deep and toward the west that will develop in a very large, I mean, typical size slow slip event as we saw before the large magnitude 8.2 in Tehuantepec, before the disruption of the seismic cycle in the whole region because of the seismic wave. So this is a large slow slip event. But look at this, how it propagates at the end towards shallow regions. It moves towards shallow regions, and the tilt help us to solve that.
Victor.
Not only, yeah, it's almost finished, no? Yes, the
No,
time
can
is.
I ask you a question?
Of course.
In all these models that you are showing, the coupling is independently estimated or is just a part of the same solution?
It's part of the same solution. So unlike most of groups that take the GNSS time series and remove some linear trends, assuming that correspond to inter-SSE periods, that bring observables not comparable because you're removing the common reference frame. Instead of doing that, since several years ago, we are inverting the data as they are, as they come from the processing. So for this reason, we are solving simultaneously for coupling, and as you can see here, for coupling and stress release slip. That's it.
If you put all these in a same, if you put in the same time, I mean, stack all these, are the coupled region stable or they change as a response to the slow slip event?
Sure. So variations of the coupling, that's what we have been studying in detail in Oaxaca, based on similar inversions for another event that took place in 2020 on June 20, Huatulco earthquake. We see that coupling changes with time in regions where we have very good resolution. So I really think that coupling is not something that remains stable with time. So this is very interesting from the mechanical point of view in terms of friction loss and things like that. That's what we are trying to better characterize. Yeah, hope to answer Massimo. Well, so let's move on because it's already so then about 6 months after this large slow slip event, it stopped almost, and then a second one. This is very interesting. The last date here is just the day before the magnitude 7.8 in Michoacán, 400 kilometers or 300 kilometers to the west. So, okay. So look at this. So this is a movie just showing how the slip evolves and the tilt goes. So how this tilt is evolving as the slow slip is taking place. So this is not my last inversion, but it's similar to the best I have. So this is the poseismic. Then it migrates to the west, and then it comes from onshore. I mean, in the shallow regions offshore. And then a second slow slip event offshore takes place here and here, offshore Acapulco. This is why since we knew that it was happening, we deployed a new station there and then tried to better constrain that problem. So I don't think I have time to present what we did in terms of template matching seismicity. So we did a huge effort during the year before the earthquake and the year after to detect as much as possible events. So around 70,000 events were detected using this template matching search. And but just briefly saying that we could establish some baseline seismicity rate in the region, and based on that seismicity rate baseline, we could. These are, for instance, some examples of the the seismicity rate in these specific spots here. So a kind of linear trend. So we took a period where no slow slip event were taking place for establish this baseline, and then we compared how the slow slip correlates or not with seismicity rate anomalies. I mean, seismicity rate difference with respect to the baseline larger than two sigma, than 1 sigma. And this is the result. So in blue is a deficit of seismicity with respect to the baseline, and in red it means the opposite. And the green things here are the slow slip countries. So just before the earthquake, look at this. Just before the earthquake, which is here, up, yeah. So just before the earthquake, there was, you will see later, an activation of seismicity to the west and east from this offshore event that I was showing you before that migrated almost from the trench toward this region. Then the earthquake happened, and there's huge seismicity right here. But look at this, very interesting. There was a concentration of seismicity to the east, so it could probably happen a larger event in 1955 event here. This is the large earthquake that had important implication in Mexico City in 1957. So there was a kind of abortion of that event, probably. And then look at the very interesting, because as the slow slip event evolves and sweeps this region here, look how it becomes devoid of seismicity rate. So there's a deficit. It is like the stress in that specific spot was already released, and the slow slipping interface go through the whole thing without any significant spaghetti to break again. So those are the kind of things we are trying to better understand now. So what I say already, the seismicity just right before the event, and this is the same in the hypocentral region. The seismicity rate this is days from the main shock. So about 10 days before the earthquake, there was an increase in this hypocentral region and other things that I already showed you. And this is the last picture here. So just summarizing what I just showed you, which is that so we found a shallow slow slip event magnitude around 6.9 took place offshore and migrated towards the hypocenter. I mean, not to the hypocenter. That's what I believe based on hundreds of invasions and tests I did. So I don't think the slow slip event goes through the hypocenter. But just like we found for the February 18, 2000, in February 2018, in the Pinotepa earthquake that sweep the slow slip event passed through north from the hypocenter, and I don't think that we haven't had in that time probably not enough resolution to say whether this slow slip that trigger that the earthquake sweep the hypocentral region or not. But I think in this case we can say that there's no at least significant slow slip event going through the hypocenter. However, seismicity was increased here. And then what, as you say, so a huge post-seismic relaxation of the development of this magnitude 7.7 slow slip event that stopped, and then a second slow slip event offshore here. So it seems that what is happening in the plate interface is a kind of at least during this period, there's a sway of slow slip going from the trench to deeper regions and then coming back. We can imagine that way. And in this case, there was a mature enough asperity in the seismogenic depth that was because of this sweeping behavior going down and up of the slow slip event was loaded large enough to break, and that may probably explain what could happen for other earthquakes in that region. So one of our questions is whether there could be enough energy in the gap given this evidence of shallow slow slip events to rupture in a large event. So that was one of the main points. We are not, I mean, we know that most of energy is released seismically periodically, as Mathilde Radiguet has shown several years ago, but we're still trying to think and developing dynamic soil rupture models in Galerkin discontinuous with radiant state and thermal pressurization to assess whether something initiating here in the Costa Chica, a large event, could eventually, because of dynamic perturbations of the rupture front, could go through the gap and produce a much larger earthquake. So that's what we try to understand in this moment, but we don't have yet a reliable conclusion. But that's the direction we are pointing on, and that's all. Thank you so much, Chris and Massimo and everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. I'll invite people to unmute, join me in thanking Victor for a great talk. Yeah, really nice, really fabulous. Okay, while he's taking a second to collect his breath, I'll just remind people that, yeah, you can use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand like this. And that'll put us in some, order to ask some questions. And while other people are thinking of theirs, I have a question that I'd like to ask. So you went through and explained to us this interesting result that the compaction of the sediments and the settlement produces this kind of strain and tilt amplification. And so I guess I can see how that would happen once. And then I wonder, is it a cyclic process? Are there some like deep sea currents or other things that would almost like reset that whole thing? Or once I get this differential settlement, then I
Sure.
don't get it anymore.
Sure. I mean, intuition tells us that. I've been thinking about that for 3 years already, that it should we would expect sediments to be enough settled to stop settling, probably, because of fluid drainage so I think to answer that question, we should introduce time in this model. It means that diffusion should probably explain or give some answers to that question, whether once this has been settled on one side, is it possible that if by any chance the ground is still tilting in the same direction to compress in the same way or even more or less? So yeah, so we don't have an answer yet for that. I'm aware of that. So, so we didn't really know if there's a reset of the sediments, if there's a quiescent period, because we are talking about very small settlements. In fact, to have the very huge tilt amplification, we need very small.
The amplifications like a factor of 1,000 in some cases.
Yeah. But in terms of mechanically speaking, because you are thinking that way as used to be. So look at this. So here the settlement after 2.5. I mean, let's say 1 microradian here. It's about millimeter. So restoring of the mechanical properties of the sediment. We don't have an answer yet. and we should introduce time, I guess, and some diffusion ideas to yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks very much. I'll let Massimo go and then encourage other people to join the discussion. Massimo.
Victor, thank you. Very interesting and incredible the amount of data that you are collecting from this subduction zone. So you are presenting for this very long section of the trench and the subduction plate, this variation of those zip events, aseismic zip, asperities, and so on. How much this is correlated with the geometry? Because in this section, the slab is flattening for a while and therefore is going. Therefore, you have not a normal competition between slab pull and ridge push because we have this flattening. So how much this might depend on the shape of the subducting plate?
Sure, sure. Thank you, Massimo. Well, the reason why we have the largest SSCs in the world in Guerrero is very likely due to this subhorizontal subduction in this part. So you can see here the contours of the plate interface that in Oaxaca become again like we would more likely like we would expect for a typical subduction, although we have a huge distortion of the, so here is not very reliable the shape of the interface, because it should, from my point of view, after many other tests and things I did, so it should more follow the geometry of the coast, in fact, but it doesn't matter. So the point is that here in Guerrero, yes, so this geometry of the slab has big implications in terms of, for instance, mineralogic phase changes in the hydrous minerals that are inside the slab. And it has been shown, theoretically on one hand, but also observationally, that it is very likely that we have overpressure fluids in the plate interface due to this flat slab that allows, so you conserve pressure. No, lithostatic pressure is conserved, but temperature is reducing. So some minerals are more likely to release the water they have and produce a high concentration of highly pressurized fluids here, allowing these large slow slip events. So yes, it's very likely controlled by geometry.
And therefore,